Hello and welcome. You're tuned into TMH Daily English News. The headlines today: the United Kingdom has said that the international community needs to get aid immediately into Tigray as urgently as possible. The departure of yet again the second U.S. envoy for the Horn of Africa exposes Ethiopia and Sudan's policy rifts, and new reports have indicated towards the rise of conflict events in Ethiopia has climbed 161% within the year of 2021. Moving to our main updates for today, the United Kingdom says the international community needs to get aid into Tigray as urgently as possible. A permanent representative of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the UN, Barbara Woodward, made the remark in a statement she gave yesterday on Yemen and Ethiopia in her national capacity.
And on Ethiopia, civilians have borne the brunt of the conflict in the north, and almost a quarter of all Ethiopians will require life-saving humanitarian assistance this year, including 90% of the population of Tigray. In the north, people are suffering extreme hunger and the physical and psychological impacts of war. So we need to get aid into Tigray urgently. Less than 10% of what was needed was able to get in over the last year, and there has of course been a hiatus in the last 100 days since December. Meanwhile, southern Ethiopia is suffering from drought, with more than 8 million people facing shortages of food and water and seeing their livestock die. So we welcome the positive statements from the Ethiopian government and the TPLF on a cessation of hostilities and hope that this is a breakthrough. This couldn't come soon enough. Drawing out the conflict any longer will only cause more suffering, including the appalling sexual violence which the Council discussed yesterday, and prevent humanitarian agencies from helping Ethiopians in need. Thank you.
Barbara Woodward is also president of the Security Council for the month of April as well. Before we move on to other news updates of the day, here's an articulate account of the plight of what the people of Tigray have been going through for the past year and some change by a Tigrayan child from Ma'ala. Serena Warada was in grade 8 when this war initially started 17 months ago, and like 1.4 million other children, she also has been deprived of education. Let's take a listen.
Tigray situation. Ethiopia and Eritrea allied forces create war on Tigray almost for 1 year into the conflict. The humanitarian situation on the ground is extremely dire. Cut off from communication, electric, bank service create mass displacement. Damage different institutions. Example, schools, health center, churches, mosques, etc. For all of those reasons, mothers are crying. Our sisters and nuns are raped. They kill people, pass schools. People are hungry. Children are under malnutrition and dying. Okay, just let's forget what happened last year. Just think about what happened last month. We were having earthquake and so many people were injured and dead. Overall, is it war or genocide? No, it's not war. It's genocide on the people of Tigray. But now our TDA found out and he's struggling against the war and to make free Tigray. I can just stay still when I see my little sister get raped. I can just stay still when I see my little brother get killed. I can just stay still when I see my mother begs house to house. I can just stay still when I see my father dies without medicine. So the solution is to make big free Tigray. We want our lovely Tigray free from that so-called Ethiopia. Tigray sir.
Articulate indeed is what that child is, and you can hear the passion in her voice as well. Moving on to our next story for today, departure of the second U.S. envoy for the Horn of Africa exposes Ethiopia and Sudan's policy rifts. Disagreements within the State Department are understood to have hindered David Satterfield on making him the second ambassador to leave this position. The impending resignation of David Satterfield, the U.S. envoy to the Horn of Africa, comes just 3 months after he took the position and throws a spanner in Washington's efforts to mitigate the crisis in Ethiopia as well as Sudan. The U.S. official confirmed to The National on Wednesday that Satterfield will be leaving his position, and his deputy, Peyton Nope, is a longtime diplomat of the file will take over for the post in the acting capacity. The exit, the second for an envoy to the Horn of Africa after Jeffrey Feltman's departure in January, is being blamed on internal failings and frustrations within the State Department. U.S. sources told The National that divisions within the Bureau of African Affairs at the State Department, disagreements between Envoy Desk and Assistant Secretary Molly Fee were behind these resignations. Other frustration sources cited for Satterfield included a lack of progress, insufficient White House attention to the region, as well as a weakened U.S. hand in Khartoum and Addis Ababa. Cameron Hudson, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, said the second departure of the U.S. envoy to the Horn of Africa will inevitably hurt President Joe Biden's administration in the long haul, and it should be looked at in the context of the U.S.'s overall diplomatic posture towards the region, which is suboptimal. According to Hudson, the general impression is that the Horn envoys have never been empowered enough by the State Department and that they have acted more as a mouthpiece for Washington policy as opposed to actually taking any action. WHO chief says the world is treating humanitarian crisis differently just depending on race. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus questioned if the world really gives equal attention to the black and white lives given the ongoing emergencies within Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and have even garnered only a fraction of a global concern as opposed to Ukraine. He was speaking in a virtual press briefing from Geneva on Wednesday and had this to say.
The whole attention to Ukraine is very important, of course, because it impacts the whole world. But even a fraction of it is not being given to Tigray, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and the rest. A fraction. And I need to be blunt and honest that the world is not treating the human race same way. Some are more equal than others. And when I say this, it pains me because I see it. Very difficult to accept, but it's happening.
Tedros has described the situation currently in Tigray as quote-unquote tragic and said that he hopes the world comes back into his senses and treats all human lives equally. He also criticized the press for its failure to document the ongoing atrocities within Ethiopia, noting that people have been buried alive, burned alive in the region. I don't even know if that was taken seriously by the media, as quoted saying by Tedros Adhanom. The government of Ethiopia and Eritrea accused Tedros of quote-unquote misconduct after his sharp criticism of the war and the humanitarian crisis within the country. But as head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus continues to expose all of the sieges imposed on the people of Tigray and its region and the man-made famine that has caused because of it. As the blockade continues, an international law expert says Ethiopia's humanitarian truce is another lull before the war breaks out again. Adisalem Desta, an expert in international law, told The Elephant that Abiy Ahmed's truce is neither indefinite nor unhindered.
Announcements on humanitarian truce, they are not going to deliver, they are not delivering. And they were not designed to deliver. They are just a temporary tactical moves to lower the diplomatic and political pressure coming from the West to buy some time for another offensive.
The expert also noted that the ongoing military offensive in Oromia is a clear sign that the government wants to buy time in the name of humanitarian truce. Reports have been indicated that these current conflicts and events in Ethiopia have climbed up to 161% in the year of 2021. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Projects documented several conflict scenarios across Ethiopia in its recent report, 10 Conflicts to Worry About in 2022, which revealed that conflict events in Ethiopia increased by 161% in the year of 2021. These marks the country's most violent years, as said in this article, and SELD described the conflicts as a failure of political agents, systems, and identities to create a sustain and stability to address threats that are currently ongoing. They further expose how the international community lacks the tools and the cohesion and approach to address the world's longest, deadliest conflicts, according to the report. Each year, they identify 10 conflicts or crises in situations around the world that are likely to worsen or evolve in the coming months. 10 cases identified in the report are not just hotspots, according to them, but represents areas of new directions and patterns of violence and where there have been major shifts in conflict dynamics as well. Staying within crisis groups, the International Crisis Group says Ethiopian government should immediately lift all obstacles to humanitarian access and services be allowed into the region. The International Crisis Group today released a report titled Building on Ethiopia's Fragile Truce. In order to ensure that the truce holds, Addis Ababa should immediately lift all obstacles to give agencies the unrestricted access they need to alleviate Tigray's desperate humanitarian situation. This is a quote from the report, adding that the federal authorities should also fully reconnect Tigray to trade networks and electricity grid and telecommunications, as well as banking services. The federal government should attempt to push the Amhara forces and the Eritrean troops to exit western Tigray zone, and in Eritrea's case, Tigray's northeast. ICG also called on outside powers to condition renewed financial support for the federal government on such concrete measures, as well as commitments to a more inclusive dialogue about the country's future. The report received criticism for recommending that Tigray's leaders should accept federal and international guarantees, and that the Amhara annexation of western Tigray will be addressed later if Amhara forces refuse to vacate, in order to focus now on famine relief across all of these regions. In related news, the Ethiopian leader Abiy Ahmed, giving directives to his generals, has displayed a war posturing. Abiy Ahmed particularly stressed the need to build a strong military in an extremely short time, exposing his true colors as a war adventurer. Our final update today, the OLF-OLA High Command calls on the international community to put pressure on the government of Abiy Ahmed to stop its war of aggression against the Oromo people and their land. In a press release issued yesterday, the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army, said that Abiy Ahmed's regime has launched yet another coordinated offensive against the Oromo people and are currently killing civilians. OLA representatives said for their thoughts for allegedly supporting the ideals that the OLA stands for. The press release alluded to a top Prosperity Party official for going on record publicly stating, quote-unquote, to eliminate the fish we need to drain the sea, referring to the need to wipe out the entire population in Oromia in the pursuit of the OLA. The press release also called on the international community to demand Abiy Ahmed's regime to stop pitting one national group against the other by deploying security forces of neighboring regions into the Oromia region. OLF and OLA called for a stop to this war, peaceful resolution of ideological and political differences, encampment of all regime armed forces in Oromia, and the formation of an independent platform for peace talks to be held. That wraps up our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.